Hello, everybody, and welcome to a super special episode of Career Diaries by Elemed on what is International Women's Day. International Women's Day belongs to everyone, everywhere. It's not just the day where women talk about other women. Women's equality is everybody's responsibility, and inclusivity is something that's really important, and it's what we're going to be talking about today. And that's why, guys, I'm super happy to be able to welcome 4 amazing global leaders for what is going to be a special group podcast, a fireside chat with a virtual fire, as you can see by my background, for those of you watching on YouTube, and a lot of chat. The theme of the session today is leading inclusively. So welcome, everybody. Let's maybe just start by going sort of around, and you can all introduce yourselves for those who are meeting you for the first time. So let's start with Chris.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Tucker. I am the Senior Vice President of Global Regulatory Affairs for Bausch and Lomb. I've been in the healthcare space for about 30 years now. It kind of dates me, I guess, on my age. And I'm leading teams around the globe, Asia Pacific, Latin America, Europe, and the US. So happy to be here with you today.
Thanks so much, Chris. Let's hand over to Matt.
Great, thanks, Elena. Really excited to be here today for this topic. So I'm the Global Vice President and General Manager for our Advanced Drug Delivery Solutions business at Becton Dickinson. We develop and commercialize a range of drug delivery devices for our biopharma partners. It's a global business, so I lead around 250 to 300 folks, excluding our manufacturing teams across multiple sites across US, Europe, as well as Asia. And on a personal note, actually, prior to this role at BD, where I've been for 12 years, my prior role at BD was an international role, and I was based in Switzerland, and certainly learned a lot of important lessons through that international experience as well.
Thanks so much, Matt. Andreas?
Yes, hello. My name is Andreas Stange, and I'm a Senior Vice President for Medical Health Services, Regulatory and Quality. I'm with TÜV Süd since more than 20 years, and I'm based in Japan. My previous roles were in different management positions. I led our Japanese operations for 8 years, and since then I'm in the medical device space again, and have led the IVD business unit for about 6 years. And since beginning of this year, I took over the responsibility for certification bodies and the quality management system. Very interesting.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Andreas. And finally, let's hand it over to Meg.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Elena, for inviting me to do this today. My name is Meg Mucha. I'm the Director of Internal Audit for Philips Healthcare. I've been in the healthcare space and quality and regulatory for over 35 years. So, Chris, I'm dating myself as well. I've led teams all over the globe, China, India, Latin America, Canada, Europe, all time zones. So it's been a fun experience. I've learned a lot about my teams and the different cultures that way. And it's been a good experience being a manager of multinational teams.
So we've really got some amazing people on this panel today, and none of you know each other, so you're going to be getting to know each other as we embark on this discussion. So the theme of what we're trying to talk about today is all about leading inclusively, because you know, it is International Women's Day today, but it's not just about women, right? We need to make it a broader conversation. And what does it actually mean to lead inclusively? I wanted to really tackle this idea of, you know, what does it actually mean to lead inclusively? What does it look like? Some best practices. What have you learned on your journey as leaders, managing across multiple different regions and all different kinds of people, and to see what we can take away from this. So first question I want to throw out there is, what does it actually mean to be an inclusive leader? Who's got some thoughts?
That's a good question. Having had people across the globe in all different cultures, I think one of the biggest things is to be really, humble and understanding that they have different points of view and different ways of viewing things, and their culture is shaping them differently. And then really embracing those differences in the team, because you need to let them be their truth selves and really do what they need to do the way they need to do it. And then just being really empathetic towards the different changes and different things going on in their culture that you may not have in your personal life, but really trying to understand what's going on in their world outside of work, and trying to really embrace the differences between them and how things are where you are.
I really like that, Meg. Sorry, Andreas. I really like that, Meg. I think the other piece I would add to that is an inclusive leader is very intentional. It's intentional in terms of ensuring that everybody's voice is heard, that it's safe to share their opinions and their experiences with others. You're creating this sense of belonging where everyone and their personal strengths can be utilized to the better of the business, and you're noticing these individual contributions and you're really thanking them for that. So to me, it's intentional, and that's what leaders need to do in this inclusive world.
Andreas?
Yeah, I think it's what Meg said in the very beginning. I really can emphasize that it's for me a learning journey to learn about other backgrounds, other cultures, and the different viewpoints you may have, which I was certainly not aware of before, let's say, having this person on the team. On the other side, I also think as a leader, it is sometimes important to push through certain resistances. I mean, I can remember a couple of years ago when I was heading Japan, we having difficulties to enable women to reduce the working time. And that was not a matter of, other managers not willing to support this, but actually the employees themselves were opposing that. So the workers' representatives were not happy with it because they said, hey, if these persons get less working time, well, we have to pick up the slack and we have to work more. So, I mean, this is kind of amazing. But anyway, these are sometimes resistances you have to overcome, and where you just have to explain the points and also work out the benefits everybody will have from such solutions.
Yeah, these are great insights, and I think that's a great example on Andreas. I mean, every person, every organization, every business is going to be at a different spot, right? So there's not a one size fits all approach. You know, I think the one piece I would add is around, and this has been part of my ongoing leadership journey, is making that visible commitment as a leader, right? So not only the individual discussions with teams, not only driving that inclusivity during your team discussions, et cetera, but actually making it visible for the organization. So putting it as, very tactically, agenda topics on the leadership team meetings, talking about it in different ways at different business town halls, et cetera, and ultimately helping other leaders in the organization see that these topics are not meant to be sort of end alsos to your role, but these are actually critical and the most important aspects of your role as a leader to better harness the power of the teams that we have.
And so when you've all sort of spoken a lot about sort of like the softer side of what it is to be an inclusive leader. It's about sort of like creating that belonging. It's about understanding the needs of your team or the people that you're leading, that and especially if they're quite different to you, maybe you don't necessarily see where your blind spots are. It's about sort of like raising awareness and talking about it more within the organization. In your minds, what are the benefits of actually pushing an agenda of inclusivity? What are the benefits to building diverse teams for the employees, for yourselves as leaders, and also for the organizations that you work for?
I mean, for the organization, I clearly see that we have new viewpoints, new aspects of looking at a problem, new ways to solve problems or to approach certain issues, which if you would be just in a homogeneous group you would never reach, or you would never able to look at or to see. And just, I mean, I'm in Japan. I mean, this is a very homogeneous country in terms of empowerment of women among, I mean, below 100 in the world, if you count down. Yeah. So, I mean, it's very, yeah, I mean, there's very little, I mean, there's a long way we have to go here. On the other hand, I'm also in Germany with a German organization. Germany as well has some issues in terms of, you know, equality and so on. But then I've been working now for 2 years with a colleague from Africa, and I can just say, I mean, it's the first time for me to work with a person from that continent, and directly even to know somebody from the continent, and it's very enriching, and we see so many. I mean, it's a different way to look at things and to work with things, but it's so enriching for us as an organization, and it's just yeah, I learn so much every day, or we both of us learn how we approach things. So it's a very good practical experience for me.
Mm-hmm. We did an exercise when I was at IBM where we actually were trying to embrace diversity, and so we had different team members talk about their backgrounds and their culture and what it meant growing up in a different part of the world, and share that with the team. And it was really eye-opening for everybody to say, oh, wow, I never realized that was what it was like living there or growing up there. And it really brought the team closer together because they all felt they really understood each other maybe a little bit more than they had before when we had these diverse people on the team. And I learned a lot from that because I could see how the team really then started to say, oh, now I see why you approach things a certain way. And they together became a much stronger, cohesive team because they had that background and that understanding now about their team members that they never had before. So that was a great experience for me and for the team, and it really brought us all together.
Yeah, I think I'll add on to that. I mean, I think there's a big body of research talking about the benefits for the organization, et cetera. But it's interesting, both Andreas and Meg talked about, you know, their individual experiences. And I think the way that BD approaches it is this is really about making, you know, BD in this case, but it applies to any organization, the best place for people to want to work, right? Both for them individually to feel that they have an opportunity to contribute to something important, to feel that they're being heard. But, you know, again, as Meg and Andreas mentioned, and I've certainly felt similar, it's so enriching for people who are intellectually curious, who have an open mindset, to have that exposure to others and to build that environment. And I think, you know, any investment that any leader can make in building their team up and helping drive their teams to be more cohesive, the impacts both personally and professionally are going to be profound.
Yeah, I'm probably aligned with you on that, Matt. I think about D&I activities at work. It does result in more engagement of the employees, a commitment to the company and to the business results. The employees are staying longer because they're enjoying where they work. They're recommending our companies to their friends and family. And really, this spills over into their personal life as well. If you're happy at work, you tend to be more happy at home, and that's important as well.
Yeah, I think it's such an important topic. And I know here we've spoken sort of about cultural diversity, it feels like, because you're all talking about different regions and I grew up in East London. So I don't know if you know much about East London, but East London historically is sort of like the part of London where you tend to have most cultural diversity. So over years and years, you tend to have like different immigrants coming in, and for some reason or another, it tends to always be East London. And that was something that for me has been really enriching, just because like when I was growing up, I didn't really know any different, and I think it helps you sort of have that open mind. And so when people come and they look at Elemed, I always get the question, is it on purpose that you tend to have like so many women in your company? And is it on purpose that you guys are so diverse? Because I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of the Elemed team, but we just seem to be really diverse, and we're diverse in backgrounds, ethnicity, you know, all different kind of things. And when I've been asked a question, it's not because I've gone out there and said, right, we need to hire more women, we need to hire people from different backgrounds. It's just completely organic. And I think it's just because like I grew up like that, you know, so it's just part of who I am, that diversity. And it's also really interesting, right? Like meeting people from different cultures and different backgrounds and learning about how they grew up and experienced lives. And I do believe as leaders, we have a role to make sure that we are creating those inclusive environments that do embrace diversity and that do allow people to shine and share their experiences with one another, because it makes for a much more enriching organization as well, right? And team. What about, so when we come back to the concept of inclusivity, aside from gender or you know, cultural diversity, what are the other kind of things that have, when we talk about inclusivity, what other areas have really connected with you over your careers?
I think one area that's certainly relevant in healthcare beyond kind of gender and culture, et cetera, is just industry experiences, right? And as healthcare as an industry is really behind some other industries in terms of how, you know, some industries would call it customer centric, and healthcare we call it patient centricity, right? But as we look to make healthcare more accessible, not only from site of care, but in terms of ease of use, how do healthcare organizations in our highly regulated environment, for all the reasons that we all know are critical, how do we also embrace different types of thinking that allow us to think differently to deliver that end benefit? So I found that thinking about folks' prior industry experiences, and I've been in healthcare for my full career, initially as a practicing pharmacist, so I don't necessarily bring that different aspect, but recognize the importance of that, whether it's high tech, whether it's consumer goods, et cetera, folks that really know how to connect with the end user and their needs.
For me, in my journey as a manager, I look to try to really create an inclusive environment for those people, those working moms and working dads out there, because I was a working mom for my entire life. So I understand those struggles that they go through to with health, you know, with childcare and with sick kids and kids activities. And I always try to create that environment where they feel like the company and the group will support them if their child is sick and they need to stay home, or their child has an activity at school and they want 2 hours to go to see that, and so that they feel like they are supported in asking for those kinds of things versus they have to hide it and call in sick or whatever. So and my entire career, I felt that come back to me tenfold from my teams, where they will work harder because you understand that you have, you know, they have other commitments, they have family outside of work, and I try to always tell them, you know, family always comes first. Your children, your family, it matters. You need to make them a priority. Work will always be here, and I can help. I can step in. Other people can step in. You got to take care of them, and that has resonated with me as I came up in my career, and it's always been something where my team just feels so grateful that they can be honest about the needs they have with their family, and just trying to support them. And it happens across the globe. Everybody has kids, and you know, their kids get sick and they need to be there for them. So I've always tried to just make sure that they felt included and not like they were a pariah because they had obligations outside of work.
Yeah, Meg, I think that's such an awesome answer. So Elena, apologies, I'll double dip on my answer to this one, right? Because I think that's a really important one, and I think one of the opportunities / responsibilities we have as leaders to help drive that is to set that example, right? So almost going overboard in sharing with the organization, hey, here's what I had to do when take my daughter to the doctor's office. Hey, my wife is on a trip and I can't have meetings from until 9:30 this week, right? Because I'm dropping the kids off at school. And I think, again, setting that environment, not only individually, but setting that kind of broader leadership tone. Yeah, that's a great insight, Meg.
I'm just recalling.
Oh, sorry, Andreas, I keep cutting you off. I think we're in a new world as well, don't you? 2 years ago, we were all walking into an office. We were greeting our team members. We were having face-to-face team members, and then COVID hit. And we all know what we had to do during COVID. And now we're coming back from that, and companies want to have us back in the office. But many of our employees are asking to be remote workers or to be hybrid workers, and how we're hiring people is changing, right? They don't want to come to an office. I don't come into an office at all. I live in Minnesota for the most part, and my company is in New Jersey and around the world. I don't see most of my people on a day-to-day basis. So how we create inclusivity in a world that is tech, in a world that has changed. We have to all agree the world has changed in how we treat our employees, how we engage our employees, and how we're engaged as employees is changing. And we've got to be able to meet our employees where they're at, and it's intentional.
Yeah.
Andreas, what were you going to say? Because I've got a point to Chris's point.
I was just remembering just recently when I was with the team in Denmark, and I was quite positively impressed that all the meetings were really on schedule. We start on the minute and we finish on the minute, especially then 4 or 5. And I just mentioned this to the colleagues, and in Denmark, women, men, all are working, and the answer was very simple. Yeah, everybody of us has kids to pick up from the kindergarten, and we know we have to be in time. So it's not just, we can't just go 5 minutes or 10 minutes longer. We all have these family duties, and it's clear to everybody. So, I mean, this is like the society being on a different level than in comparison to Japan, for instance, where overtime is in the old-fashioned Japanese style companies is like completely normal. Yeah. And I mean, traditionally you would not leave before your boss is leaving. Yeah. So that is slowly changing, of course. But then, I mean, I think the company can try to move and develop ahead of that, and try to bring the employees with them or with us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really valid point as well, I think, because Scandinavia seems to have this reputation of being just more advanced when it comes to this type of approach, and it's really interesting to hear you talk about that. In the UK, we're sort of trying to get there, and I think we've made some really progressive steps, but we still look to Scandinavia as sort of like the prime example of of forward thinking when it comes to flexible working and different HR policies. Matt, Chris, and Meg, you're all in the US, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What's the culture? How do you see the difference between the culture in the US versus Europe when it comes to these sorts of things?
I mean, I think it differs by company. Philips, being a company out of the Netherlands, is very open to remote workers and flexible scheduling and having that work-life balance. Other companies are not as open to that, and there's been a lot of news about different companies who want their people to come back to work, and if you don't want to come back to work, you can look for a different job. So it's very different here in the US. I think it's becoming more accepted to maybe be working from home, but again, it's really depending on the leadership of the company that you're with and whether or not they want you to be working from home. So
I think Chris made a really valid point of meeting your employees where they're at, because I think a lot of this change is generated by the employees, and as employers and leaders we have to learn and adapt around ultimately what the workforce looks and wants. And I think you make a really valid point, Chris, about home office and the world looking really different. But one thing that I have to say that we're seeing is that there is almost this like generational gap, because if you talk to younger people that are entering the workforce, or that, you know, were sort of like in their first role, they came to the workforce when COVID hit and they were working remotely, completely alone. There's quite a lot of data that shows that actually they do want to go into an office because they're not very well set up to work from home, and it can be really lonely. And actually, even at Elemed, we were sort of doing a sort of questionnaire on more flexibility, and there was almost a difference between sort of like the younger members of staff, you know, wanting to be in the office more, wanting to build that connection, because, you know, I think also inclusivity is about everyone. And sometimes, you know, people forget about the younger generation that are coming through now that want to be able to build that connection, and where work is ultimately their life. It's where they build their relationships, it's where they make their friends for the future. And so the question also is like, how can we be inclusive, diverse, create these flexible working policies, but still make sure that we are not excluding the younger generation that are coming through that actually want more of this stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's hard. You have to really, in this digital world, try to get your team together more often, even digitally, just so that they can connect on a personal level, right? So you have to schedule meetings where you start talking about what's going on at home, how are the kids, and, you know, have that personal dialogue that you would have in the office that they never get to have. So they can get to know each other a little bit and talk to each other about things outside of, you know, work. And I feel as a leader with a really remote, diverse team that you have to do that a little more often, just because you'll never build the team otherwise. If you can get them together in person, that's great. That isn't always possible, but you need to build that team together so that they know what your life is like outside of work, and they know each other that way. Because otherwise they'll never build those relationships if they're just seeing each other on a screen at one meeting a month. So
yeah, and that links back to that sense of belonging that Chris was talking about at the beginning. Chris, what do you do? What's some of the tricks and tips that you can share with us around how do you go about building that sense of belonging? Although she might be frozen. Chris, are you there?
I'm here again. Sorry.
That's all right. We were talking about building a sense of belonging. How do you do that with your teams?
You know, we do that through a couple of different ways. Obviously, just having those weekly staff meetings, whether it's that quarterly town halls within our function. Where I can, we'll try to get some face-to-face interactions there. If I can come out and meet a team in their location. Boy, does that really help to create that sense of understanding with that group. We also do something that I've learned about just thanking them, right? Acts of gratitude. So we start every staff meeting with who are we grateful for on our team or outside of our team. And then I send them a little note saying, hey, I heard that you did great things in this area. And it's amazing what that inexpensive recognition can do to create a sense of belonging within a team, right? Thank you. Oh, I was just doing my job. No, thank you for doing your job. That's exactly what we need you to do. And I'm thankful for you.
That's a really nice tip. Because actually, like, recognition is one of the main things, you know, when we talk to people, you know, why are you considering to leave your job? Often it's, you know, lack of progression or don't feel valued. It's not often about the money, I have to say, at least in the markets where we recruit. The money is nice, right? But it's not usually the primary motivating factor. And usually it's to do with relationships and feeling valued and connection. So that's a really, really nice tip, Chris. Thanks for that. Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris covered it really well. I think the only angle I would add on to that is sort of sense of belonging to what, right? So the one other element, in addition to kind of the team touch points and the individual touch points that we spend a lot of time trying to cultivate is that, you know, what is our team why, right? And what is the purpose of what we're doing? Because every day has its ups and downs, every month has its ups and downs, every quarter, every year, et cetera. there's good days, there's bad days, there's good news, there's bad news, but trying to keep the team grounded on, hey, we're not just doing this business case, guys. We're not just making this, risk-based decision. What we're actually trying to do is impact healthcare for millions of people globally, right? And so it's kind of that sense of belonging to what, as a complement to, I think, many of the things that the other panelists have mentioned.
Thanks very much for that, Matt. I can see you've been listening to Simon Sinek then. So you've all spoken to me quite high level about concepts, but I'd really love for some real, wear your heart on your sleeve now, guys. Like, give me a moment where you learned something about inclusive leadership that really marked you as a leader. A scenario or a time when something happened and you might have made a mistake, but it was a big learning for you and it's changed the way that fundamentally you lead.
I'll give you an example. So
Okay.
I was managing a team in France, and in France, at least I found with this team that connection early in the morning or right after lunch was really, really important to them. They would always go and I'll use air quotes, take a coffee. Would you like to take a coffee? And I learned that it was really important. It was 10 minutes out of my day. And I made time. Every time I came to France, I would make sure that I did not have a meeting during that little window of about 15 minutes, so that when they asked me, Chris, would you like to take a coffee? I always went. And that was a time for us to just discuss, how are their kids doing? Are they going on any new trips? What's exciting for them? What did they do over the weekend? And it wasn't about work, but it was about that connection that we would have. And then we'd go on with our day. And we might do it again in the afternoon, quick. But for me, that was a really important connection point with this team. And it didn't matter our titles, it didn't matter what our roles were, but I got to meet a lot of new people and learn about what they were up to.
And is that specifically for France, or is that something you do now with all teams everywhere?
Yeah, I think, it was with France, but it can be applied anywhere. I think what you hear, and I'd love my American colleagues to tell me this, we're too quick in America. We're too quick with everything's going on to the next issue. We write our emails quick. We don't engage in an email. We don't say, hi, how are you? How was your weekend? We go right into, I need something. And so developing this relationship, regardless of the geography, it could be Poland, it could be Japan, it could be China, I think is a really important piece. And so for me, it was learning it in France, but then applying it across, and I try to do better on my emails as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things I learned that kind of surprised me the most was during COVID and talking to my team when they were in China and understanding how different things were happening there versus here. And, how they would get locked down and their block was locked down or their neighborhood was locked down and that they had to stay in the house and they couldn't, and just understanding how stressful and that was for them, because we didn't have those things happening here and most people didn't have that happening. But when you can't leave your house for days on end or weeks on end, that's a stressful time. And just trying to understand what they were going through mentally, and then when they could get outside, just trying to encourage them to go outside. Don't worry about work, get outside, reconnect with some other people. But just that whole difference in the way COVID was handled really opened my eyes to how different communities and different people were reacting to COVID, and then just try to help them through it and make sure that they knew I was there for them. And I was going to understand if they needed some time to get outside because they got a 2-hour window, they could go outside, go, right? Don't worry about work. But that was really eye-opening to me to just see the differences, because it kind of happened with different people in different localities where like things would shut down and they couldn't go anywhere. but then trying to work through that with them.
Matt, what about you?
Yeah, so no, I think those were two great examples. I mean, for me, actually, to me, it's an ongoing process of learnings, right? And we're here on this podcast because we all care about driving this for our teams and developing ourselves. But actually, a recent learning that I had is still how much more room there is to go, right? And sometimes being blind to your blind spots. So we recently introduced a tool to understand, biases and some of the language that we have in different job descriptions. I'm like, okay, really interesting. Maybe we've got a few things here and there to tweak, and then you get it, and it's like red all over the place, right? And it's digging and trying to understand that. So again, that was just eye-opening for myself, and I think we've all talked about it needs to be intentional and needs to be a continuous journey, and that's just the most recent example for me of there's a lot to continue to unpack around this topic, and the important thing is to continue to put the focus on it, to do that with the goal of driving improved inclusivity.
Yeah, that stuff around the job descriptions and gendered language is a really big thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data as well that sort of shows that that women tend to apply for jobs differently to men. And there are, like, depending on the way that the job description is written, you'll either naturally appeal more to men than to women. And also, if you've got a ton of bullet points in your requirements section, you're just by having those without even meaning to, you just start excluding women from applying to your roles, because it seems that somehow women tend to look for adherence to all of the requirements more than men. So LinkedIn's released, they're constantly updating this data, but there's quite a lot of data around this that shows that, where men are much more likely to just like give it a go if they don't fulfill all of the criteria, where women inherently tend to have a little bit more of this, I must meet all of the criteria, otherwise I'm not going to give myself a chance. So that's something really small, but it has a huge impact. So thank you for bringing that point up. Andreas, what about you? So tell me about a time where I feel like I'm interviewing you now, where you learned about inclusive leadership.
Well, I mean, I really value the one-on-one interaction and the personal discussion or personal interaction with people. And when I was CEO in Japan, were like 250 people across the country, and I asked my assistant to make a weekly lottery to pick out one employee, not my direct managers, but one employee to have lunch with him or her, and then naturally we get to know each other a little bit better, and also they can, of course, I mean, I will always ask for advice or hint what we can make better, yeah, so that we really don't lose touch with the real life on the working place, yeah, with the reality. I mean, it's so easy to get detached and be in a ivory tower, yeah, and think about strategy and this and that, but really lose touch with the reality on the ground. So I really that was very insightful, and I'm still trying. For example, when I now started my new job, I did the similar thing, and also in Japan, you don't make like decisions or discussions in meetings. You use a technique called nemawashi. That means that with the individual people, you have a one-on-one beforehand. You discuss the topic, and you check out and convince the individual people for this solution or that solution. And then once everybody is through, you have the formal meeting and you just tick it off. Yeah, that is very typical, and it's very. I really employ that also elsewhere, because it gives every individual the opportunity to really raise concerns, and you can address it. It takes, of course, a lot of time, but I think it also makes you understand that there are many more issues you may have not seen, and you also may not figure out in a group discussion. So that is it's time consuming, but I really like that, and it helps me a lot to make better decisions and to bring everybody along.
Really interesting how you all spoke about like the human connection element to this. I'm learning so much just from listening to you guys. And I think Meg made a really interesting point. I don't know about you, but when it was COVID, it's like the whole world had a common theme of discussion when you opened a call or when you opened a conversation, and no matter where people were sitting in the world, you could ask, or, you know, how does it look wherever you are? And it would naturally open some conversation. And I don't know about you, but I learned a lot about the people that I was working with and our candidates and the companies that the clients that we have, just by simply asking that question, because we deal obviously on a global basis. But it led me to think, okay, well, what's the new theme? Like, what's the new thing that you're talking about with your teams? Or is it just something that has just dropped off and we've sort of slid back into how things were pre-COVID in terms of the conversation? Because that would really be a pity if there wasn't a new doesn't have to be a world pandemic, I'm saying, right? But how can you build that that culture within the team where there is that common ground, similar to what Chris was saying, the gratitude piece, for example? I think there's some really interesting thoughts shared here. Let's keep going. So I'm conscious of time, and I want to get maximum return on the time that you're spending with me here today, guys. Give me one thing, one action that leaders can take to champion inclusivity within their organization. So we'll start with Matt, because I think Matt already light touched on one of them.
Yeah, and I'll be quick because I want to learn from the other panelists here as well. On my side, what we try to do is just make it that visible commitment, right? So both on our leadership team meetings and in our broader organizational communications, always touching on it from some aspect, right? Because it's not one thing. There's many different angles. There's many different perspectives that different people can share on the topic. So just driving that continuous learning for the organization.
Chris?
I would say one thing that has worked well for me has been skip level meetings. So making sure that I'm having these meetings, not just with my direct reports, but with their direct reports and down into the organization, and encouraging those leaders to go down farther into their organization. They're uncomfortable at first. People can think they're in trouble. Why are they having a meeting with the boss? But it's amazing what it does to open up lines of communication and really just create a sense of belonging and say, I can come and talk to Chris about anything. She's open and willing to have these conversations. So for me, those have been very, very helpful.
How do you frame them, Chris?
Usually I come up with 2 or 3 questions that I want to hear about. I want to hear about their projects, how their work, you know, how the projects are going. I want to hear something about their family, and I want to hear something about what we could do differently to make our department that much better. So
really
I try to be very intentional with my questions so they don't get all nervous about why we're having this meeting.
Really nice. Thank you. Andreas, what about you?
To be honest, I think in my communication within our team or also to the outside, I'm fairly ignorant and not stressing really a diversity or something on purpose. I mean, I think I try just to do it and just to highlight a performance and just to do it as natural as it is. It should be natural, you know. I don't need to emphasize that I work whatever with great female leaders or with other great guys. Yeah, I mean, they're just there, and they are as they are, and so I am as I am. So I try to do it just naturally.
Thanks, Andreas. And Meg, what about you?
Well, the past few years I've taken to looking internally within our company to see if there's some diversity training we can do as a team, and then bringing that discussion to a team meeting, either doing the training together or bringing it back and having a discussion around the table of what did you learn? You know, what did you think about this? We also did some work with biases to understand what biases were and discuss what everybody had, some of their biases, just so that everybody could kind of feel like they were, you know, doing it together and getting and, you know, opening their eyes as a team and learning about each other as well. And that's been really helpful with the teams to just do that work together and then see that they're not the only one who maybe had a bias or didn't realize something that someone else did. And that's also helped with the team dynamics and bringing the team together.
On bias, there's a really good TED talk. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but if not, it's one to add to the list. It's by Kristine. And hopefully she listens to this and she'll hear that I'm giving her a shout. But it's a really good one. She talks about flip it to test it, and it's all about flipping round the concept of, like, if you say something, flip it to test it, and if you flip it and it feels wrong, then you're inherently, then there is some inherent bias around that thing. And it's really interesting. I had a recent experience where I was at an event, and I won't tell you which one or where, but it was a CEO event, and I was the only woman in the room, which I didn't really notice. I mean, I noticed it, but it wasn't really a thing, because I was there to learn from other CEOs. We were on a networking lunch, and one of the CEOs came up to me and sort of was trying to make conversation and said, "Oh, Eleanor, if you're interested, I know another female CEO that I can introduce you to in case you want to, know another female CEO." And that was a good example of flip it to test it, because you'd never go up to a man and say, "Hey, I'll intro you to a man CEO," but then you would, you could to a woman. So it's really interesting. So I recommend checking out that TED talk. Guys, we're coming to the last couple of minutes of the episode, but there's one thing I really love talking about right at the end of these, which is all about legacy and impact. So one big question, and we'll go round so I can hear all your answers. What is the impact that you want to leave on the world? Who wants to take that first?
I can go. I think for me, it's really, I want to make sure that my team feels empowered and they feel like they're growing in their career, and that I'm helping to advance them in that. And to know that, I'm helping them move to whatever direction they want to go in, and encouraging and supporting that learning that they need to get there. And I think the biggest compliment I ever got was just recently, where one of my former direct reports reached out and said, "I finally got the job that I've been working towards all this while, and thank you so much for all your support and opening opportunities to me." I mean, that's the biggest compliment I could ever get as a leader.
Thanks, Meg. And that's one of the most rewarding parts of leadership, isn't it? Matt, what about you?
Yeah, so I mean, simple answer, probably complex in practice, but I mean, for me, it's to have a positive impact on others, right? And that's going to mean different things for my parents versus my wife versus my kids, right? Versus my team. But I think somebody mentioned earlier, it's not just a team driving business objective. These are people that have their own families, et cetera. And how we set the tone as leaders can have an impact not only on the business, which is our job, certainly, but also on people's lives. So it's really to try to drive that positive impact however possible.
Thank you, Matt. What about you, Chris?
I grew up, my parents were teachers. My mom was my history teacher. My dad was my math teacher. We lived in a small community, and it was pretty much expected that I would go into teaching, but I didn't. Yet I think what I do every day is focus on teaching my team, teaching my regulatory professionals, that teaching them to be better at what they do and to be better leaders. And in essence, I am a teacher, and that's the legacy of my parents giving that to me, and that's what I want to leave for the world.
Thank you, Chris. Andreas, I'll leave the last few words with you then.
Yeah, I think what I would be really happy if my guys or the people I work with, if they can see themselves after some time somewhere which they couldn't imagine beforehand, and maybe, of course, that they can develop this way as well. That is, if I can inspire this, imagination, maybe a path you would not have thought about beforehand. I mean, that happened to me many years ago, and that was somehow a very good experience when you suddenly open that way of thinking, that you may see doors or ways which you never thought of, and then when you finally even can go there, that's fantastic.
So guys, those are some amazing legacies, which I'm sure you're on the way to already building. And thank you all so much for jumping on this session to talk about inclusivity on International Women's Day. I've learned a lot. I hope our listeners have learned a lot. I hope you've all learned from each other as well, because it's a journey, isn't it? And no one has all the answers. So I've really enjoyed talking with you all today. To everybody who's listened in, don't hesitate to give it a like, give it a thumbs up, give it a rating, connect with our speakers here today, and join me on another episode of Career Diaries by Elemed in a few weeks. Thank you and goodbye.